This is Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic. And now your host, Michael O'Fallon.
I think you can feel it all around you. We are being pushed from an objective, true, physical, analog world and into a radically subjective, surreal, alchemical, digital world. A massive attempt to impose ideological subversion on the United States, to break down our national discourse, the way we talk to each other, to keep those of us with differences from speaking to one another. But some patriots, well, they've been doing their best, despite consequences before them, threats around them, and dangers behind them, to continue the discussions, honest discussions, dialogue that may not end up convincing the other person, to challenge someone who has different conclusions, to think, to consider why they believe what they believe, and what intellectual and spiritual pathways brought them to the beliefs that they have. Well, this past week, we lost one of those who was attempting to guide young minds out of the morass of critical theory and revolutionary liberation concepts in our primary and secondary education models. We lost a man who was literally attempting to take the get out to vote momentum away from the revolutionary Democrats, and he successfully did so. We lost a man who was attempting to bring together diverse coalitions for the sake of getting Republicans into office successfully. We lost a man who, as I have watched him over the years, was becoming stronger apologetically in the defense of his faith, growing day by day. We lost a man who was actively leading young men and women to Christ, or at the very least, to darken the door of a church. Well, that man's name was Charlie Kirk. And not only was Charlie attempting to bring young men and women, desperate for truthful pathways for their lives, to a better understanding of our Constitution, our nation's founding, and our liberties, but he was also depositing the seeds to eternal truths that lead to a life lived in the reality of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and what that means for an individual and for society. But Charlie, horrifically, was gunned down this past week at Utah Valley University. Utah Valley University, by the way, the school that is a United Nations Academic Impact member institution, which, by the way, UVU organized the first international academic conference on the Sustainable Development Goals in 2022 to foster academic approaches to made-up global challenges to promote degrowth in the United States and further the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. So let's not forget that nugget of what made Utah Valley University so unique. UVU hosted the first international academic conference on the Sustainable Development Goals. Why It Matters was the name of the conference, fostering dialogue on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, goals that are meant to dismantle free market capitalism and usher in techno-feudalism and the rise of multipolarity. And I should also mention that Utah Valley University is home to a UNESCO chair focused on developing solutions at the intersection of artificial intelligence and sustainability. You know, UNESCO, whose constitution states, quote, "Since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed." So it is in the minds of men where we can create an intersection of brain interface devices, artificial intelligence, and global governance. But I digress. But I don't want you to forget what was happening at Utah Valley University. Utah Valley University proved to be the site of the execution of Charlie Kirk. I just thought I would mention this as it is an important fact that should be mentioned as the investigation into Charlie's murder goes forward. But let's step away from that for now. And even with the things that maybe I had disagreements with Charlie on, or maybe you did, let's step away from all of that. The man's not even in the ground yet. What was it that made Charlie such a threat? And was Charlie a threat not just to the progressive left, but also a threat to other machinations that have been underlying our current metasystem change? Because Charlie Kirk, you see, he didn't die with a knife or a gun in his hand. Charlie Kirk died with a microphone in his hand. The power of speech to change the world must never be forgotten. And that was the power that Charlie exercised, the power of speaking his mind to bring light on evil and to bring light out of the darkness. Now, I personally have a rather interesting story that spans back more than a decade with Charlie, and something that Charlie and I had very much in common, attempting to create good faith discussions and even debates out of diametrically opposed positions. But to say it plainly, I met Charlie before Turning Point USA, before this massive momentum that was built around his movement that would change the nation. I met Charlie in a rather humble way. Now, I've told this story to Charlie. Even as we shared the stage a few years ago, I said it on stage, it's been recorded. So this isn't the first time that I am relating how we met. It was many years ago, the year before TPUSA received their 501c3 designation. And I was sitting at breakfast at CPAC, and two men that I've been doing business with to more or less start the Tea Party movement and give life to it brought a very young, skinny, smiling from ear to ear teenager to come and meet with me. And my two colleagues believed that I could help this young man reach unparalleled heights. So I sat with this young man, and he began talking. He talked about the current Republican course and how we both agreed that it was off course. We discussed the potential candidates that were queuing up for the next presidential race and how we both didn't really care for the direction we were going. We were both libertarian in our leanings and regards to freedom and individual sovereignty, but we were socially conservative. And what was the reason that my two clients had brought Charlie to me was his vision for what his eventual organization could be and how they had seen me build other organizations very similar. And as I listened, the young Charlie Kirk had a fairly good, but not yet tight vision for what organization could provide as a turning point in the United States in just a few years. He was a fast talker, as many young, energetic men are. And that's not to denigrate anybody. It's just they're full of energy. They want to explain to you their vision. They're excited to tell it. And at the time, I felt as if I was conducting a job interview that I didn't really have scheduled for that morning. So we also discussed his Christian faith. And at the time, Charlie's faith in Christ was a little bit loosely defined. You know, of course, I come from a Christian apologetics background, in ministry background. And we didn't necessarily find ourselves in the same theological camps, as I was staunchly in the Reformed camp and very much dedicated to apologetics. But the young man really had a clear vision for what he wanted to accomplish in his life, which was accompanied with a confidence like I had never seen before in such a young man. And I would say that it was so strong that it almost didn't look real. Like, this can't be real. This kid can't be serious. Within his list of hopes was to be as influential as Rush Limbaugh. And we can address that later, but he eclipsed Rush Limbaugh in terms of his influence, I believe. And after listening at length to Charlie and really forgetting about my breakfast at that point, I gave Charlie a few nuggets of advice that I give all of my close friends and colleagues and people that I believe have potential. People who are trying to climb the ladder or trying to get a seat at the table. Number 1, don't worry about getting a seat at the elite's table. Build your own table. 2, don't be pulled and manipulated by the Republican establishment. Number 3, don't take the money that will eventually attempt to seduce you. They will muzzle you if they can control you. Number 4, devote yourself to the Lord. Number 5, always align yourself with truth over tribe. Now, Charlie added a few more goals. I listened. He seemed like he really was excited to tell me everything. It was like squeezing out a sponge of all the plans that he had. I listened intently. Took a few notes, actually. We shook hands. And then we all headed into the exhibit area there at CPAC. When Charlie's handlers contacted me at lunch to see what my thoughts were on Charlie, I replied, well, I'm not really sure he's ready yet. I mean, it all sounds fantastic. I mean, this guy really is selling a vision. But let's watch him for a few years. But I'm not really ready for an investment just yet, of time or of money. And as we have said on stage with Charlie there next to me, that was probably one of the biggest professional mistakes of my life. The next year at CPAC, TPUSA had received its 501c3. Charlie came to my booth excited to show me what was happening. And he exclaimed with glee, with just joy, we have our 501c3. The energy at this new organization was off the charts, by the way. You looked over in the corner where they were and they're trying to set up, and it was all kind of, it wasn't like what some of the Koch-funded organizations at CPAC were doing, where they had, multiple displays of, they probably spent $50,000, $60,000 on some of those displays, maybe more. It was like, hey, let's get it up. Here we are. We're planting our flag. That's what TPUSA was in the beginning. Young people were swarming to their kind of hastily put together booth at CPAC. And quite honestly, I stood there in a bit of amazement at how quickly Charlie's organization had exploded with young interest. And it wasn't just young interest either. It was people that were older than me, kind of the boomer class, going, wow, this is something. Something's happening here. And all of a sudden, young people in their teens and early 20s were not just flocking to the bars and the eateries of the Gaylord National Resort, piling up beer cans outside of their doors like they had done for years, but they were actively involved in recruiting people into this brand new organization. Brand new. And man, really, TPUSA and Charlie Kirk took off. Now, at the time, Charlie wasn't a huge radio personality. Charlie wasn't a TV pundit. Because that's not really the way to do it nowadays. Charlie wasn't doing it old school terrestrial radio way. Charlie had started a movement. And month by month, year by year, TPUSA exponentially grew. And not only did TPUSA grow, but it also invested in important moments in history. So you see, it was a TPUSA-sponsored video of a discussion between James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, and Helen Pluckrose that was recorded, if you recall, back in 2018 at Portland State University in regards to whether or not intersectionality was a new religion. And that got my attention in regards to having a discussion with Dr. James Lindsay way back in 2018. because James Lindsay identified several aspects of these cancerous ideologies that I was attempting to explain to my evangelical Reformed friends, to my friends that are in the corporate travel business and in corporations that I have been dealing with since, my goodness, going back to 2011, where these things started to pop up. You see, critical race theory and intersectionality aren't just bad ideas. They are new religions. New dogmatics of a new religion that are meant to put to death the old Christianity and resurrect a new, revolutionary-minded, vengeance-dedicated new form of Christianity, which is not Christianity at all. So in essence, it was TPUSA's initiative to make that video from Portland State University public that helped to introduce me to James Lindsay and vice versa. And year after year, we're still watching this, 2017, 2018, 2019. TPUSA grew and grew and grew. And its influence was overwhelming. So overwhelming, really, that eventually TPUSA's events would overshadow those of the establishment CPAC conferences. Now, along the way, with my previous interactions with Charlie far, far in the rearview mirror, James Lindsay and I were holding an invitation-only, very private meeting at the Trump International Hotel in D.C. during CPAC in 2020. That's right, February of 2020, right before everything went haywire. And as we sat in the lobby of the hotel discussing what we were going to say and how we were going to launch new discourses during our time in D.C., well, then all of a sudden, Charlie Kirk was walking by. I called out Charlie's name. Didn't know if he was going to recognize me or not. It had been now basically 7 or 8 years. And he stopped for a minute, rather puzzled, looking at like, I should know you, but I don't. And I told him who we were. Now, Charlie was obviously in a rush to a lunch or something like that and was kind, but was sort of going to pass us by. But then during the conversation, it would occur to Charlie who James Lindsay was and then who I was. And we had a good chuckle about the situation for the next few years after that. Going, oh yeah, I dismissed you, and now you were about to dismiss me. And so, the second half of our relationship with Charlie Kirk began. And Dr. James Lindsay became one of Charlie's closest confidants. Now, I became someone that Charlie would reach out to in regards to what is happening with the manipulation of Christianity. And we also talked about broader issues, metasystem changes, artificial intelligence, the singularity, and especially about the changes in the freedom of mobility and travel. Some of those conversations were public, either on the Charlie Kirk Show several times, or at our conferences for sovereign nations, new discourses, or for TPUSA or TPUSA Faith. So many of these conversations are public, and you can listen to these conversations today, but there were some that were private as well. We had many agreements, and then as well, we had some pointed disagreements. But as you can imagine, Charlie had a lot of men and women trying to get in his ear, constantly. And a lot of men and women wanted to take what was now the aircraft carrier, this gigantic battleship or formation of ships that was TPUSA, and drive it into their personal ambition direction, where they wanted to go, or where those elites wanted this battleship to start moving towards. But that isn't a topic for today. Let's understand what was actually happening with TPUSA and Charlie. And let's now focus on what Charlie had accomplished over the past 13 years or so in a very short period of time. And if you are a young man or woman who wants to make a difference in your nation, this would be the time to take a few notes. What is it that you can learn from Charlie? Well, number one, have a clear, unambiguous vision of what you want to accomplish that will change the course of history. Charlie started out with a grand vision, and he never gave up on that vision, even before TPUSA was formally created. Charlie had an idea of the impact that he wanted to have on the young demographic landscape of the United States, but then it went beyond that. And it wasn't all crystal clear yet, But Charlie was thinking big. So don't just think small. Don't think baby steps. Think big. And then think of the lead measures, those baby steps that will get you to those big ideas, those big goals, those things that you know that you want to accomplish or that you believe that the Lord has placed on your heart to accomplish. Number 2, adjust the goals when necessary. So if you think back to the stages of explosive growth for TPUSA, Charlie's focus early on with TPUSA was more libertarian in construct. But I remember a time specifically, and this would be at an SAS, I believe, function that they had back in 2020, after the Bang Energy's Girls drama that was drummed up explosively by Rod Dreher. That was a little bit of hyperbole there, Rod. The TPUSA movement moved in a more focused spiritual direction, rightly. And this direction helped TPUSA grow both in size and influence as it began to set the course for the conservative resurgence post-2020. That was something that I know in terms of what happened with the board of directors and other men that surrounded Charlie said, let's take a moment, pause. Are we going the wrong direction here? They made a course correction, and that course correction was correct. Number 3, surround yourself with the men that have the most knowledge. Charlie leaned heavily on Christian apologist Frank Turek. I know Frank, and sharpened his witness through the years. Charlie didn't want to get caught flat-footed in his discussions on campuses, which is the case that we all should be if we call ourselves Christians. Charlie wanted to show himself as a true disciple of Jesus Christ, as a workman approved who was ready with an answer for the hope that was within him. Charlie wasn't willing to shrug off difficult questions about the Christian faith because he knew that having the right, truthful answer could spark that providential moment in the mind of the unbeliever. And this is something that Charlie and I had in common. It was also something that I had pressed Charlie on when we first met a decade and a half ago at CPAC. Because unlike 80% of the pastors in the SBC and the PCA, you can't give heretical definitions for the Trinity when you're in these kinds of situations. You never know who it is that you're speaking to, whether it's somebody who is from Islam, someone who is a Mormon, someone who is a Jehovah's Witness. And if you give a heretical answer, that's something that you're going to be called to the carpet on. And it would also be good if you had a factual framework around the inspiration, transmission, and canonization of Scripture. That you understand actually what that process was. And there's also where Charlie's relationship with James Lindsay became so strong between 2020 and 2024. Because James Lindsay understood the what, the how, and the why cancerous ideologies were creeping into our American society, into our corporate world, into education, and yes, into faith as well. And this is where I could really advise the what, the how, the why, and the who especially, that we're bringing these same cancerous ideologies into the Christian faith to transform the Christian faith. Now, since that time, there have been several that have whispered false alternative versions of the transmutation of Christianity into the TPUSA Faith team, but I digress. Number 4. This is very, very important. Time is precious, so make the most of it. I would encourage you to think back to all of the things that Charlie Kirk had accomplished. TPUSA, TPUSA Action, TPUSA Faith, bringing thousands of young people into embracing conservative values, bringing thousands of young people into a life in Christ, creating the momentum of young people to contribute to getting conservatives back in office, authoring several best-selling books, having a beautiful wife and 2 children, and all of this before the age of 31. Now, young man, young woman, what is your excuse? Charlie did all of this with the help of those who caught the vision around him in a very short period of time. And now I want you to reflect on a man who had a great presence and influence on what would be known as the Great Awakening. His name is Jonathan Edwards. And he laid the groundwork for the Great Awakening, composed an essay that he had written in 1734 that has had an impact on me. And that essay is entitled, "The Preciousness of Time and the Importance of Redeeming It." The preciousness of time and the importance of redeeming it. See, Edwards' key text that served as the inspiration of this essay was Ephesians 5:16. So let me read for you the context that surrounds Ephesians 5:16, beginning with Ephesians 5:15. "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And the will of the Lord is to make the best use of the time that he has allotted to you." Let me read that again. "And the will of the Lord is to make the best use of the time that he has allotted to you." I want you to read the first section of Jonathan Edwards' essay on redeeming the time, and I hope you will understand the importance of redeeming the time, just as Charlie did. 31 years. That's all he had, but so much accomplished. Charlie redeemed the time that the Lord had given him. The work which we have to do is to prepare for eternity. It must be done in time, or it never can be done. And it is found to be a work of great difficulty and labor, and therefore that for which time is the more requisite. Third, time ought to be esteemed by us very precious, because we are uncertain of its continuance. We know that it is very short, but we know not how short. We know not how little of it remains, whether a year, or several years, or only a month, a week, or a day. We are every day uncertain whether that day will not be the last, or whether we are to have the whole day. There is nothing that experience doth more verify than this. If a man had but little provision laid up for a journey or a voyage, and at the same time knew that if his provision should fail, he must perish by the way, he would be the more choice of it. How much more would many men prize their time if they knew that they had but a few months or a few days more to live? And certainly a wise man will prize his time the more, as he knows not but that it will be so as to himself. This is the case with the multitudes now in the world, who at present enjoy health and see no signs of approaching death. Many such, no doubt, are to die in the next month, many the next week, yea, many probably tomorrow, and some this night. Yet these same persons know nothing of it, and perhaps think nothing of it. And neither they nor their neighbors can say that they are more likely soon to be taken out of the world than others. This teaches us how we ought to prize our time, and how careful we ought to be, that we lose none of it. Fourth, time is very precious, because when it is past, it cannot be recovered. There are many things which men possess, which if they were to part with, they can obtain them again. If a man have parted with something which he had, not knowing the worth of it or the need he should have it, he can often regain it, at least with pains and cost. If a man have been overseen in a bargain, and have bartered away or sold something and afterwards repents of it, he may often obtain a release and recover what he had parted with. But it is not so with respect to time. Once time is gone, it is gone forever. No pains, no cost will recover it. Though we repent ever so much that we let it pass, and did not improve it while we had it, it will be of no purpose. Every part of it is successfully offered to us, that we may choose whether we make it our own or not. But there is no delay. It will not wait upon us to see whether or not we will comply with the offer. But if we refuse, if it is immediately taken away, and never offered more, as to the part of time which is gone, however we have neglected to improve it, it is out of our possession, and it is out of our reach. If we have lived 50 or 60 or 70 years and have not improved our time, now it cannot be helped. It is eternally gone from us. All we can do is to improve the little that remains. Yea, if a man hath spent all his life, but a few moments unimproved, all that is gone is lost. And only those few remaining moments can possibly be made his own. And if the whole of a man's time be gone, and it be all lost, it is irrecoverable. Eternity depends on the improvement of time. But when once the time of life is gone, when once death is come, we have no more to do with time. There is no possibility of obtaining the restoration of it, or another space in which to prepare for eternity. If a man should lose the whole of his worldly substance and become bankrupt, it is possible that his loss may be made up. He may have another estate as good. But when the time of life is gone, it is impossible that we should ever obtain another such time. All opportunity of obtaining eternal welfare is utterly and everlastingly gone. End quote. It was a sermon preached in London in 2016 on that particular passage from Edwards' essay on the preciousness of time that led me to begin Sovereign Nations. You see, I had knowledge of some things that were going to happen, and I knew that if I didn't speak up, the entirety of the Christian faith, the United States, and the West as we know it, could fall into radical ideologies and eventually a transformative revolution. So no more could I be concerned about what profits I was going to make the next year because it didn't matter. No longer could I be concerned about keeping my mouth shut. I had to speak. I had to start a movement. And so I did. And Charlie, just a teenager, who had only drive, ambitions, and goals, did the same, with an understanding that time could be possibly running out. Because if you think back to 2011 and 2012, back when Charlie started, it was the Kochs, the Teals, the Paul Singers of the world that were attempting to manipulate the conservative youth. Charlie started a movement based on liberty, on freedom, on conservative values, and eventually on the gospel of Jesus Christ. But he understood the preciousness of time. And you must as well. Charlie did not know that he would only have 31 years. But he acted as if each day could be his last. And so when you gaze upon Charlie's grave, when you mourn his loss, you need to ask yourself, what am I doing with the time that the Lord has given me? Charlie had 31 years. 31 years of no excuses. 31 years of momentum and breaking through resistance. Now, what about you? My question to you is, look at Charlie's life. Look at what he's accomplished. What are you called to do? Whatever you're called to do, get busy and do it now. I know we need you in this effort because we may only have one opportunity to save the gospel, to save humanity, and to save this nation for our generation and the next. Charlie needs you to carry on with even greater results because there is no lose in this. We must win. I'm Michael O'Fallon, and this has been Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic.